Okay, welcome back. This is the second Art Deco tutorial that we're going to do today. Before we start, I've gone to the fontfabric.com website and I've downloaded the Metropolis font and installed it onto the computer. So when you want to use it, just double click on this icon here. It'll take you to a download page and you can install it. Okay, let's get started. So I'll go into Photoshop and I'll create a new document. I want to use A4, 300 pixels per inch, 8-bit, and I'll call it Art Deco 2 and click OK. And once the new document opens, I'll just hit F on the keyboard and Control plus to make it larger. Okay, the first thing I want to do is change the colour of the background here, so I'm actually going to use a gradient which uses the foreground and the background colours. So I'll change the foreground colour by clicking on the icon, and in the RGB numerical selectors here, I'll type in 20 red, 20 green and 20 blue. And you can see it's not much further up from black, and I'll click OK. And the background colour I'll change to 40, 40, 40. You can see it's slightly lighter. Click OK. Okay, so I'll zoom out a little bit and I'll bring in some guides as well. I'll line that up again. Okay, snaps to the middle, great. With the colours selected, I'll go to the gradient tool. I'll use my radial gradient and I'll just swap those colours around, so the brighter one is first and the darker one is in the background. And I'll click and drag up to somewhere there and then zoom up. You can see the corners are slightly darker. It's giving me a sort of vignette effect. Okay, you can also see colour banding in here where the gradation's going from lighter to darker. So we'll fix that by adding a bit of noise to it. So I'll simply make sure I've changed these colours to the default black and white colours by clicking on this small icon. And I'll go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and I'll choose 2%. Click OK, and you can see that the banding has now disappeared. Okay, time to add our type. So I'm going to change to white as the colour first of all, and I'm going to use vertical type. Okay, horizontal type and vertical type. So we're using vertical type. I'll click on that and I'll type on the side of the line, and I'll type in the word Metro, and then I'll click on the move tool. Now I want to duplicate this, so I'll just hold the Alt key down, drag the layer over, and release, and then I'll change the spelling of this word to graphical by double clicking in the thumbnail in that layer, which selects it and will allow me to grab it. Okay, once I've done that, I'll rearrange my type. So what I want to do is bring down a guide, and I'll use the arrows on my keyboard, making sure I'm on the graphic layer here, and I'll pull that down. That'll do it. And then I'll hold Shift and grab the other layer, and I'll move them up a little bit. And that'll do fine. Okay, at this point I can get rid of the guides, so View, Clear Guides. And we're left with our type there. Now what we can also do with these, instead of right clicking and rasterizing, if I just sandwich these two layers together, they'll rasterize automatically. So once they're both selected, I'll hit Control E, and you'll see that it actually shows me the word graphic, but those two pieces of type are now on one layer. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to select them by holding my Control key down and clicking inside the thumbnail on the layer so it's selected. I'll actually hide the selection. I'll keep it active but hide it by hitting Control H. And I'm going to choose two colours. So the foreground colour, I'm going to use a blue, and for the background, whoops, I'll swap those over, and for the background colour here, I'll choose this brown. Okay, I'm going to use a gradient on here, so if I choose a gradient tool, you can see the gradient using the colours I've selected becomes active here. So I'll click on that, it'll open up the window for it, the editor for it. So I'm just going to click in the centre here, and I'm going to add some white, or near white, and close it. Now because we've got a selection active, all I need to do now is just drag a gradient through it, and I'll get those colours from a brown to a blue all the way through. We can have a look how dragging straight down will change the look of that. A shorter gradient will give me more blue, but I want it to stretch over the whole lot, so I'll just stretch it over that. Okay, that looks good. Okay, next thing I want to do is add some perspective to the type. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Perspective, which will bring up a bounding box around it, and all I need to do is just drag in the corners there. I'll drag these ones out, hit enter to initiate the change. I'll zoom up a little bit, and you can see I've got a problem there with the selection, and what's happened is I haven't deselected, so I'll undo that, edit, step backward. If I hit Command H, you can see the selection is still active, so I'll deselect it with Control D, and then I'll do it again. So edit, transform, perspective, and I can drag those in. I'll drag this one out. If I'm happy with it, I'll hit enter. And then I'll hit Control T again, because what I want to do is I want to spin it. And place it, and I'll also grab a corner while holding Shift, and I'll drag it out and make it larger. If I want, I can squash it up a little bit as well. And I'll hit enter. I can still use the move tool and drag it, however, if I'm not happy with its placement. And that'll do. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of depth to the text. So I'll just zoom up a little bit. And on this layer here, I'll add an effect. By hitting the effects button down here, I'll choose Bevel and Emboss. And I want this to be 90. And this one here to be 25. I'll give a little bit of depth to the type. I can decrease the depth if I want to. So 50. That'll do it. We just want to give a slight embossed effect. Once I'm happy with that, I'll click OK. And then what we also want to do to this is we want to pull some of it out of focus. We're going to use a tilt shift focus trick. Photoshop 6 has a filter that allows you to do this. Photoshop 5 doesn't, so we'll do it the old-fashioned way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Channels tab. If you can't find Channels, just go to Window and Channels. I'm going to duplicate the blue channel so I can see what I'm doing. and I'll have black and white inside here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use my gradient tool. I'll use linear gradient, and I'll pull diagonally along the type so I get something like that. No, I don't like that because I need more black, so I'll do something like that. Possibly work. Might make it a little bit higher, so up to the P, that'll do. And then what I'll also do is I'll blur it. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'll pull it right up to 250 and click OK. Now once I have this channel with a gradient over it, I'll go back to RGB to select it. Back to layers, so I'm on that layer is active, and we're going to run a filter effect over it. So filter, blur, lens blur. Okay, and you can see I can't see what's going on, so what I might do is cancel that, and I'll flatten the image, so Control E. I'll do it again, filter, blur, lens blur. That'll show me the entire type. It's usually set to none as a depth map, so we want the blue copy, which was the channel we copied, and we put a gradient over. I'll invert it. And what's going to happen is anything that's black will become blurry, and where it was, where it's white, where it's black will be sharp, and where it's white will become blurry. So what I can do here is I can simply up the radius to pull that type out of focus. I can also add some specular highlights, so if I lower the threshold, you'll see that I'll get more highlights appearing on that type. And once I'm done with that, that's looking okay. If I want, I can just add a bit more sort of radius to it. So we're keeping this part of the type down here sharp. I can pull it back a little bit if you don't like it. And I'll click OK. Now before I do that, just double check what you've got. Make sure it's what you like. I'll click OK, looks fine. Lens blur will take a little while to calculate. So go away and make some toast or make yourself a drink or something like that. Okay, the effect has been applied, so I'll just zoom up and double check it, and it's not looking too bad. It's a bit blurry, but it's fine. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a new layer to it, so I'm actually going to duplicate this layer by dragging the layer onto the new layer icon, and then I'm going to blur it out again. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'll choose something like that. Maybe 10 pixels. I'll click OK, and I'll set the mode for the layer from normal to screen. Now what this will do, this will brighten everything up again, but I can control that, because what I want it to appear that it's lighter at one end where it's blurry and darker at the other. So on that layer there, I'm going to apply a mask. So if I go to layer, a layer mask, and I'll say hide all. And once again what I'll do is I'll use a gradient to control it. Okay, and I can keep on changing it. You can see there's a gradient mask being applied to the layer. So I can keep on applying a layer till I get what I want. Okay, the layer itself also, I might blur that. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'll blur that mask out. And I'll also add a bit of noise. Filter, noise, add noise. 2%. Now you can still see some banding taking place, so what I'll do is I'll just adjust the opacity because I didn't want it that high in the first place. I just wanted a slight light change on it. And the underlying layer, what I can also do is darken it up using levels. So if I hit Control L, which will bring up the levels, I can darken that up. And click OK. And if you don't like the way that mask has been applied, another thing we can do is simply to I'll delete that layer. I can add a new layer and fill it with black. And what I can do with it is set it to screen, and everything will show through, and I can add a lens flare to it. Render, lens flare, and I'll use that one there. There's a lens type. Okay. Might place that somewhere in the middle there. I'll change this from screen to linear dodge, might improve it a little bit. And I might hit Control T and just stretch that out a bit. Hit enter, and what it'll do, it'll give the illusion of it being a sign. If I don't like that, I can just rub areas out, such as this area here. If I use the eraser tool and I use a large brush, I can just rub that out and it won't affect anything else on the image. And then once you're happy with what you've got, flatten it. Control E, File, Save As, Art Deco 2 PSD or JPEG. JPEG is there, save to the desktop, okay, save. Making sure the color profile is embedded, maximum quality, okay. And thanks for watching.